Welcome to What Haunts You, podcast about the stories that haunt our dreams. I'm Katie.
And I'm Carly. Welcome to episode 2. We're going to be talking about both movie adaptations of Stepford Wives. So that'll be the 75 adaptation and the 2004.
It's an adaptation of the novel by Ira Levin.
Yeah, the wonderful novel that I highly recommend.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick read and definitely good. I did try to read it again for this discussion, but I lost track of time and didn't. But I know I read it in like a day before.
Yeah, it goes by pretty quickly, I think. And it's just interesting. It's like interesting enough to keep you kind of invested. But yeah, so the kind of basic story is, right, it's about a couple who moves to a new neighborhood called Stepford, where everything is very like polished. It's exactly what you picture when you picture like kind of classic suburbia. And the woman starts to notice that something is not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in thinking about the original movie, the 75 adaptation, what were your kind of initial thoughts about it when you watched it?
So I saw the 2004 one first. I think I saw it like around when it came out. And then I read the book, and then I watched the 2004 one again fairly recently, and then I watched the 1975 one. So I feel like that I just want to set up how I was going into it. I felt like it moved kind of slowly at some points, but it definitely was spookier to me. Like it actually has way more horror elements. I liked it. It I thought that the story was more interesting and less predictable than the new one, even though the new one has like one big twist that I forgot about every time I watched it.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I really liked it. I actually, which I feel like this is rare for older movies and books, but I actually did read the book first. And I really liked the original movie because I just felt like the tone was very like true to the book. I felt like it translated really, really well in a way that I really liked,
Yeah.
and really liked the actor playing Joanna in the original.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of my impression of both films was based on knowing or not knowing the actors. And like the 2004 one, everybody in it was pretty much a big name. And people who I had seen play other roles and seen interviews of and stuff. And I know the people in the 1975 one were all like pretty big at the time, but they're not people who I know. And I think that that actually lets me fully embrace the character more and like what is that saying that I can't think of, like remove myself from reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it helps you buy into the movie.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I want to kind of like set up the first movie with a quote from really early on in the story where they are settling into their new house in Stepford, Joanna and Walter. And he is like informing her that Stepford has a men's association where all of the men kind of go basically every night, it seems like, and leave their wives at home with their kids and to clean the house and all of that.
I thought it was interesting in the original, the 1975 one, we like hear about the men's association, but we don't really see it at all until the end, whereas we're like kind of in and out of there in the new one.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a lot sneakier in the new one, I would say. But yeah, so as he is telling her about this, she looks at him and she says, I give up on you. Why don't you ever just once tell me the truth? You pretend that we decide things together, but it's always you, what you want.
Mhm.
You asked me if I wanted to move out here, and I found you'd already been looking at a house. You asked me if I like this place, and I found you'd already made a down payment. Now you're asking me about the lousy men's association, and it's quite obvious you've already joined. Why bother to ask me at all?
Yeah, I feel like Ira Levin would agree with the modern statement that men are trash.
I think so too. I think so too. And I think that this quote really kind of sums up the type of dynamic we're looking at in the relationships in this movie, of like the men as the head of household and the women as the support, right? And like she is there to kind of do what he wants and to like enable him to do what he wants.
Right, and not just support, but like subordination explicitly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another scene where he's kind of like sitting and drinking alone, and she wakes up and sees that he's not in bed, and she goes down and she's looking for him, and he's like, nothing, nothing, everything is fine. And she's like, it's not fine, I was worried, Walter, I love you, but you expect me to be a mind reader. And he looks at her and he goes, I love you. Like he says it like he's realizing it almost. And this is kind of after we know he's gone over to the men's association. And so I'm very curious. I think, okay, spoiler alert, all the women are animatronics in Stepford. And I'm very curious, like, is it the first day he goes that they tell him that like this is what's going on? Like how early does he know for sure that this is what's happening? And in that moment, like rewatching it, or like even the first time since I knew the story, I was finding myself very curious as to, is he like in that moment trying to decide?
I actually don't remember that scene specifically, but I know like they have all the men, maybe not all of them, but there were like quite a few men that came over to their house, and one of them is like making a portrait of Joanna, and I think that he's like a famous artist or something, so she's like very flattered, but it's like part of how they're making the animatronics. And that I think was at least towards the front half of the movie.
Yeah,
And he definitely seemed in on it and like aware at that point.
yeah, it's definitely quick. And yeah, so somebody is sketching her, somebody else says that they are doing a research project on accents and get her to record like a list of many, many words. And she meets Diz. He used to work at Disneyland. And she says that that is hard to believe because he does not seem like a person who likes making people happy. To which he says, like, how little you know.
Oh yeah, and one of the big things that stuck out to me was that Joanna's husband, like right after we moved there, they meet Carol Van Sant, which is their neighbor. She has like a different name for like the person who's pretty much playing the same role in the new one. But um, when Walter meets Carol Van Zant's husband, they're like both getting the mail or something, and he's like, "I met your wife earlier. She cooks as good as she looks." I feel like that just that phrase is like very that could be their catchphrase.
Yeah, a wild thing to say. Yeah, she also meets Bobby, who is like another newer resident to Stepford who is not yet animatronic. And when Bobby sees her house, she's like, "Oh, a messy kitchen. It's beautiful. It's a home away from home." And she's like, so they're so happy to be interacting with each other because whenever they talk to any of the other women, it's like just about housework and like raising children and cleaning, and nobody has anything to say.
Right. Like Joe wanted to hang out with Carol Van Zant the first day. I think she was like, "Come over for some tea." And she was like, "Oh, I just can't. I have to wax the floors."
Right. Right. Exactly. And anytime we like visit any of the houses, the women are kind of like cleaning or taking a break from cleaning or getting food ready or, doing whatever. And it is all that they can seem to focus on, right? And anytime they try to kind of like Bobby and Joanna try to draw them into anything else, they just kind of come back to that. But there's a really interesting moment where Bobby and Joanna are walking around, and I think this is at the party. Joanna is saying to Bobby, like, this is also amazing. Why don't I like it? I mean, I like it. It's perfect. How could you not like it? But I don't like it. And she's trying to kind of sort through, like, why is this so perfect, but I still am not happy here? Right? Like, why is this is what we all are supposed to want? Is this so unsatisfying? Yeah. And I just think about, right, like, this is obviously like an extreme, but I do think about like how many women who kind of give up themselves to be a wife and mother have that kind of thought process of like, this is what I was like trained for, right? This is what I'm supposed to want. Why am I not okay with this? Right? Why can't I embrace this the way that I'm supposed to?
Yeah, I feel like a level of that is sort of normal. Like, even when you do get something that you really want, like, it's maybe not the way that you envisioned it, but this is like definitely beyond that. And not, I mean, a lot of these women we find out later were like involved in the women's associations and stuff like that. And then when they try to start a women's association in Stepford, they end up just talking about cleaning products.
Yeah. Yeah. That scene is like so heartbreaking to me because the three women who are actually like still just human women are having like really they're being really vulnerable, right? Like they're talking about, one of them is talking about how like, I don't think my husband ever loved me. That's like that's like a heavy thing.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the Stepford Wives just kind of devolve, and it almost sounds like an ad. Like they're talking about this product called Easy Off, and one of them basically sounds like she is quoting like an advertisement, and you kind of see like
Yeah.
the three women's faces just drop, like, oh, even if we do this, we like can't really do this. And I just think about like the sinking feeling you get when you like have relief of being in a space that's full of all women, but then like realizing how invested in the patriarchy the women around you are, like, and realizing that sometimes it doesn't even matter if there are men around because like women are doing men's jobs for them.
Yeah, I feel like that is something that is just kind of in the air in the first one and is like very explicitly the message of the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think, and it's funny because that scene, the thing that like really comes into my head is like my very, very brief time being in a sorority, and like you're surrounded.
What? You were in a sorority?
Oh my God, I know. Like, I know. Very, very briefly. I was for like about a year. And that is really what it was like. It was like, this should be so nice. Like, I'm surrounded by women. I'm like supposed to be close with all of these people. Like, this is so supposed to be nice. Why don't I like it? You know what I mean? But why I didn't like it is because of this. Like, it wasn't cleaning and cooking, but it was like, how many calories are in your food at like the student center, and like make sure you bring like a cute boy to this party, and like it was just very much like this same feeling of like, even if I'm surrounded by women, I cannot escape all of this.
Mm, yep. Yeah, I think like a lot of different kinds of oppression count on people of the group that's being marginalized buying into and pushing it forward.
Yeah, and I think that is the feeling that was in the scene with the women's club meeting for me, for sure.
Yeah, that meeting also, like you were saying, it sounded like an ad when they were talking about it. It kind of reminded me of like Tupperware parties where like I think that's sort of like the first thing that has evolved into like various forms of multi-level marketing where women are like leveraging their social relationships to turn into walking ads.
Yeah, it definitely had that vibe for sure. There is also, I think maybe this is a good time to just like in general talk a little bit about like the idea of white flight, because I do think that's like very central to both of the movies.
Totally.
There's like a scene where an older woman who I think is widowed and is still seemingly like a human woman is like very proud of the town because like the first black family is like moving into Stepford, and she's like, it's about time that this is happening, like we shouldn't be like stuck like this or whatever. But really thinking about like just like the way that the realness of that, and like how interesting it is for a movie back then to kind of name this really explicitly of like, this is a stupid thing that's happened, that like, and this is not really okay, right? Like I feel like for the time period it's like interesting to me that that was addressed directly.
Yeah. They don't have the black family in the new one, which I was wondering why they were doing that. They seem to have replaced them with a gay couple. And I mean, I do think in early 2000s, a lot of the messaging that I was getting as a kid was like, racism is over, which is definitely not true. And especially talking about segregation ending. And there is like hella segregation still. I mean, obviously, racism is still a major issue and affects every aspect of life, but it's just so gross, and I don't understand like wanting to live in a completely white area.
Yeah.
And especially in the 70s, so much of it was like hidden in like zoning laws and things like that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, there was a lot of like kind of like little ways that they would, not little, really big ways that they would find to basically just set it up so that things would kind of filter in that way on their own. And like Stepford definitely seems to be that type of place, right? Like all of the houses are quite large. They all seem to be on like quite a substantial little bit of land, right? Like there's not any kind of like denser housing for anyone who might have less money. Like it's definitely like,
You have to be high income to live there.
right. Mm, right. And so it is definitely like, it's like peak white flight, right? Like it's just, they're like, let us get to this little perfect town where like nothing is going to be wrong and we'll be away from the city.
Yeah, one of the phrases that kept coming up when I was reading about this era and white flight was quote unquote bedroom communities, and which is I guess what they called them, which sounds like something sexual or romantic to me, but I guess it just means like places out of the city where people would go and they pretty much would just sleep there and then they would commute into the city for work.
Wow, that makes so much sense. I've heard that phrase before and didn't know what it meant. And like having grown up in the suburbs, that like makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Eye-opening moment there. Yeah. So, but there is that interesting scene where she's kind of bragging that a black family is finally moving into Stepford. And like, we don't see too much of them. We see them at the very end as like the will this happen to them or won't this happen to them kind of setup. But mm, it is just interesting to see that like there is this kind of older woman, like liberal figure who is like somehow separate from this, but still like lives in Stepford. And like, what an interesting like thing it is that she even exists in this story.
Right. Yeah, she does seem kind of like outside of the rest of the narrative. And I kind of think she's like a symbol of the, well, I guess a symbol of progress, but kind of like the anti Stepford wife.
Right. Well, and I think it raises like an interesting question of like, A, like obviously what happens if somebody is widowed, right? And like she was probably widowed before this was happening. And then I
Yeah.
think something that I actually thought about like watching this time, watching both of the movies this time, is like we know what happens to Stepford wives, but like what happens to Stepford daughters?
I was thinking about that so much too. Like, what at what age are they like, okay, now you can't be a human anymore? Because there seems to be like they're very loving to the children, but they're also very separated. But I know in the older one, like the kids, you see the kids get on the bus, and the kids don't seem right. Like, they definitely seem like they're already animatronics or like manipulated in some way. They don't seem normal, and like Joanna and Walter's kids definitely notice it when they get on the bus. It's less obvious in the new one.
Yeah. I think that they just seem like the exact picture I have in my head of like overly well behaved like suburban children who like don't really get to be children, and it is like kind of weird and off-putting.
Yeah, the it was noticeable to me that they're like there aren't any teenagers, so you pretty much like only see the stage of life that's like childhood specifically and then adulthood. And then I was thinking with that older woman also that like part of it is that men stop caring about you when you're older. Not like, I mean, if you're in a loving relationship, hopefully not that person, but like in general.
Men like the men in Stepford.
Right. Yeah, if like, yeah, if you are being cared about only because of your looks, then age is such a huge thing in the beauty industry and in society in general. Like that, like trying to keep yourself young, and once you're old, you're like no longer of value because you've lost your beauty.
Yeah, that is no, that's actually a good point.
So they like might have not even cared if she was like already a certain age when they were doing this.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Yeah, it is interesting. We only do see like a couple of different ages. It does seem like all the kids are like kind of like 12 and under, and then all the adults are kind of like in the same stage of adulthood.
Yeah, I actually, as I was like going through my notes, I scrolled on Instagram and found an ad for Brooke Shields' memoir or documentary. I think she released a memoir and then has a documentary that's like kind of based on it. But one of the things that somebody was saying was they were talking about how sexualized she was when she was very young. And one of the people who were interviewed said that as a response to feminism, men started sexualizing women younger and younger to manipulate them. But I feel like sexualization of women started, and like of children, of little girls started way before that. But I do think like the more progress feminism has made, there's always like, I want to say flashback, but that's not it. What is it? Pushback.
Like snapback.
Yeah, snapbacks. There's words are hard. There's
Yeah, but it like there's always kind of some sort of like retaliation
right.
against it.
Yeah, exactly.
Shows up in diet culture too. Maybe we'll get to that at some point.
Right, 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 right. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about how in the old one, Joanna had a therapist. I thought that was like really interesting, and her therapist was like, "You should probably leave, girl."
Yeah, yeah, she does. She goes to a psychiatrist because the husband basically is like, you're being crazy. And she goes and has that she really understands like what's happening, even if she doesn't know like the mechanisms of it. She says to the therapist, there will be someone with my name and she'll cook and she'll clean like crazy, but she won't take pictures and she won't be me. And this is like shortly after she's seen her like closest friend in Stepford be like changed. And so it's just so
Oh,
sad.
it is. I thought it was before that, but I guess
No, it's
okay. So Bobby and her before that both go to see her ex, who's a scientist, because Bobby has heard about how there's like a town that they have lithium in the water, so everyone's calm, and so they like get the water to have it tested to see if it's something like that because they're like, these people are not right. And the guy is like, oh, you're obviously coming to see me because you're unhappy in your marriage. But one of the things that I really admire about the women in this story, and like, I think probably one of the reasons why the 1975 one is my preferred one, is like all of the women just seem like so smart, so level headed and calm. I mean, like the ones that aren't animatronics already, but they're just like, I don't know, they're real people, which is like even still something that's somewhat hard to find as a presentation of women in movies.
yeah. Yeah, very true. Like they all have like hobbies and interests and like big personalities.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because if they didn't, it wouldn't like showcase the change as much. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of necessary in a story like this for them to be more fleshed out so that we can really feel like the tragedy of them being gone.
Yeah. The contrast.
Yeah.
So we were talking about when she finds Bobby. I think like that scene, isn't it? That's that kind of got mushed into a different place in the first one. I'm not sure where it is in the book, but doesn't she go to Bobby after she like is hiding from her husband and they have the big fight?
Yeah, so Joanna tells Walter that she's going to leave and he basically like physically attacks her, which very typical, I would say.
Yeah.
And then she like goes over to Bobby's to like try to figure out like what the hell is happening here. And she like cuts her hand open and is like, when you cut me, I bleed. Like, what happens if I cut you? And she like stabs her in the stomach.
I know. She like fully stabs her in the stomach. I was like, why didn't you cut her hand also? What if she was a human?
I know. I was like, you were really, I mean, it was very obvious that something was wrong, but I was like, you were really confident that this was like not a fixable thing because you just really went for it.
For real. Yeah. The scene before she goes to her though, like that like when she's in her house and I think she like hears Walter on the phone and they're like talking about how they're going to change her or like get her, and they're like, we already have the kids, everything's in place. That scene, it hurts me. I that is like the most that's like actually a scene out of a horror movie, which I think like a lot of it is pretty neutral before that.
Yeah. And I think one of the really sad parts is like the next kind of step in that is that they basically lure her to where they need her to be with like clips, like recordings of her children calling her, which I think is
Fucked.
like so cruel. Like that is just so cruel to like have your kids like yelling for like their mom and you're looking for them and you get there and it's just a recording and she just like obviously realizes that like she has been had.
Prime example of men being trash.
Totally. Well, and something funny this time. So, first of all, I think not really funny, but I watched this movie like only a day or two after I was rewatching Us, the Jordan Peele movie, with a friend who hadn't seen it yet. And then watching this movie shortly after, I was just thinking about like how absolutely fucking scary the idea of being murdered by like someone or something that looks exactly
Oh
like
yeah.
you would be. Like that's just like there's something so scary about like the idea of like seeing yourself outside of like a mirror or a photograph, you know what I mean? Like that is like such a scary thought in general. And then like the reason it's scary I think is because of stuff like this, right? Of like what do you do if there's two of us standing here? And it's just so scary. It's just when she, especially she's like looking at this version of her like getting up and like just coming towards her. It's just
Yeah.
so scary.
That's true. I hadn't thought about the relation to us. And it's also interesting to me because I feel like I've always thought like if there was another one of me, we'd be friends. But like I think that would feel like an extra betrayal if I was like, "Oh, me, my friend," and then they were trying to kill me.
Yeah. And then I didn't know exactly like where to bring this up, but I just like want to talk about the boobs for a second because all of the wives in Stepford, like all of the Stepford wives, the ones that have been like quote unquote upgraded, whatever the fuck however you define that, like they all just have these like big perky boobs that they didn't have before. And I just like that's just so it's like one of those things that is like so cliche, but like also just rings so
Now I
true.
just have Beyonce's Upgrade You stuck in my head. Totally different vibe though. But yeah, the boobs are like a major symbol of being hyper feminine, I think, for them. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's also just like I feel like all of these men just want to be taken care of like babies, and that's like their part of the obsession with boobs, but they want like a sexy mommy.
Yeah, which I think is just true of very many men in this world.
Yep.
I think that kind of relates to something that I think is really important. This is kind of jumping ahead a bit, but in the remake where like they're talking about like how the husband in the remake doesn't go through with it. And they're like, "Why would you do this?" And she's like, "Because he's a real man. Like he doesn't want a sexy mom."
Yeah. I don't know. That didn't hit for me. I was just kind of like, ugh. I don't know. That I scoffed.
Oh, really? That's it. Wait, can you tell me more
I don't know.
about
I
that?
think it was just like too on the nose for me a little bit. And I think also like they're trying to do this like redemptive arc for men through Walter. And I'm not sure if he deserves that. Like it's like he's getting like all these props just for like not murdering her. I don't know. That was the feeling I was left with. Like, yeah, you just did the thing that you were supposed to do, bud.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the within the twist of the remake, that is probably my favorite line in it, but I still don't love the twist overall. Well, I guess do you want to kind of talk about like the differences you noticed between the original and the remake?
Yeah. So I think I'm just kind of go through a similar but point out where things are different. I mean, like the first scene is like one of the biggest differences. We see she's like a high powered executive for a TV company, and she's introducing the new slate of shows, and one of them is called I Can Do Better, I think. There's like a few things. It's like very early 2000s. There's like one
Yeah.
show that has Meredith Vieira, who was the host of So You Want to Be a Millionaire. And there's like a few other things. And then the in I Can Do Better, they like set up, it actually really reminded me of the show Temptation Island, which is like a current dating show. It's a little different because like the couples in Temptation Island are just like separated, and then they're all with people. And in I Can Do Better, I think they said that they were like specifically with, I think they used the phrase professional prostitutes. And at the
Yes.
end the man is like, I hung out in the hot tub and like this lady was really sexy, but I love my wife and I want to be with her. And then the wife is like, I've never had an experience like this and I just like got tended to the whole time, and I think I can do better. And then pretty soon after this, we're like back in the auditorium where she's giving the speech. The show is like on a screen, and the man from that show shows up with a gun, and he's like, I have an idea for a new show. It's called Let's Kill All the Women. And I was like, oh shit. And that's like, I mean, first of all, just very bold opening, but that was like, that is a lot of men's response to women having power in general.
Yeah, it makes me think of the, oh, I forget his name, but there was like a mass shooter who made like a video in his
Oh
car
yeah.
beforehand, basically talking about how he was doing this because he wanted to like kill all the women because like he could
Yep,
not get a
yep.
woman.
It's a real thing. And oh yeah, and I remember when they were introducing the show, she says that it's the final gender challenge. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting wording." And like they're really setting us up for this.
Hmm.
And the show is pretty much exemplifying men feeling emasculated and women are feeling bored and restrained.
Well, and feeling emasculated specifically by like women's
Right. Yep.
sexuality.
And then when he shoots, I thought this was like kind of on the nose also, but I liked it where he like literally breaks the glass ceiling over her,
I didn't even think about that.
and the
That's
shards
funny.
like are like coming down at her, and like one almost hits her. And yeah, I mean, I assume that they thought of the metaphor in there, but maybe it was just a coincidence. And then the next scene, we see her, she's like walking into her office and she's like, oh yeah, I'm a boss. And then she sits down and she learns that that man, before he came there, had killed his wife, or I think she was in critical condition, but he had shot her five boyfriends. And Joanna like barely flinches. She doesn't even really seem that traumatized from the shooting that happened to her. And she's just like, okay, so we'll pay their insurance bills and then we'll have a live reunion where we heal them and bring them together. And the woman who's talking to her is like, no, 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 you don't get it. We're firing you because then we can just sweep this all under the rug. And that's like kind of
Right.
when she loses it, because her whole identity is her job, pretty much. That like this is where I feel like the two Joannas are just like totally different creatures and characters. They have like, they're going through this similar plot line, but the first Joanna is like an artist, and like she, so much of her life is still revolved around her family. I think part of this is like due to the time period when both of them happened, but it was like a big change. But I think it is like kind of similar to like in the 70s, it was like more bold for women to have jobs or interests. I don't know. I'm not from the 70s. I don't know. This is just what I've heard.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Joanna in the original movie and also in the book is like still quite committed to her photography and like trying to get it off the ground more. And like like she still really cares it, like she's invested in her family in a way that I think the remake one is like not as much at the beginning, but she stays as they move, she is still committed to her work, whereas in the remake Joanna is very much like trying to turn over a new leaf as they're
Right. I think one of the
moving.
biggest things was Joanna seems to be the one who's prompting the moving in the new one.
Yeah, and she, while she's there, even kind of goes so far as to tell her husband, like, okay, tell me what to do. Like, tell me how to be this different person. And he, like, tells her to wear different clothes and to, like, act differently. And she's, like, trying, she's like, she's convinced that this is worth trying.
Yeah. She seems to have like bought into the idea that what she was doing was wrong. And I think mostly just because when she lost it, it hurt her so much. But she seemed pretty fine with how it was going. And she's definitely getting punished a lot for not being available for her children all of the time.
Yeah. And I think that it's important that the remake is so campy
Agreed.
because to me it feels incredibly unbelievable that like an early 2000s woman who was like running a company basic like a production company or whatever her position was would like overnight be like, yeah, I'm going to be a housewife, tell me how to be a housewife. Like I just don't really buy into that, and I think the campiness and like exaggeration of the movie overall like makes it a little bit more
Yeah.
okay that it's hard to buy into, whereas like the first one the tone is so serious that if they had made it like that I would have been like, nope, like I'm checked out, this isn't down to earth enough for this
Right. I do
movie.
think that the tones of both were right for each movie and for the time. So last year was the 50th anniversary of the book being published, and there's this really cool thing that has like a bunch of notes from Ira Levin's notebook and like talking about how he wrote it. That's actually where I found out about bedroom communities at first. And Walter's last name is Eberhart. I think that like hyphenated names seem to be a big thing in the new one, and I think people started hyphenating names way more in the 90s, and that was like part of third wave feminism more, I guess. Like women being like, wait a second, I don't want your name, or at least we should have both of our names here. But Eberhart, he that came from Eber translating to boar in German, and it was supposed to be like a play off of the phrase male chauvinist pig.
Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I would like to get a coffee with Ira Levin. I don't know if he's alive, but
I feel like I found out he was dead, but maybe he's alive. I'm looking it up. Yeah, no, he died in 2007. I'm sorry.
oh, I am gonna spiritually send a coffee to him
Yeah,
wherever
I
he
mean,
is.
I feel like whenever I'm asked like what famous person I'd like to have coffee with, it's usually living or dead. So that works.
Yeah, I'm gonna file that one away as an answer.
Yeah. So in the new 2000, I mean, it sounds funny to me to even think of it as new because now 2004 is almost 20 years ago. I feel like we're maybe due
Mm.
for a third installation.
I would argue that we have already
Oh yeah.
gotten one. Um, because I would really argue that Don't Worry, Darling stepped in as the kind of
Oh, I haven't
2020s.
seen Don't Worry, Darling, but isn't it set? Is it set in present day? Or I thought it was. I thought it was like about the past.
Oh, it's like more modern day, but I think that the 2004 version was also modernized. Like, I think in my mind, it becomes increasingly modernized with the times. And like the 70s one kind of corresponded to that time period, and the '04 one kind of corresponded to that time period. And I really feel like the next kind of like logical technological evolution of the movie, of the story, like fits very well with
Okay, well
Don't
that
Worry,
makes me want to
Darling.
watch Don't Worry, Darling. I had been unsure before.
Yeah, I didn't think that I would like it, and I loved it, but I loved it like contextually within this framework. Like I really feel like it could have been based on it. And I'm sure it was like incredibly inspired by it. I can't even imagine otherwise. But I do think that it is like kind of the next logic, like if the kind of updates to the second version, like the 2004 one kind of was like the next logical step forward from the original. This kind of feels like the next logical step
Okay,
forward from
cool.
that.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. The I was gonna say, so they go in. She's like being shown around by Mrs. Van Sant, and she says like, "This is a smart house." And I mean, I just thought it was funny that they said that because one of my favorite Disney Channel original movies is Smart House, which came out just a few years earlier in 1999, and it's kind of like similar vibe. Like the house is the Stepford wife in Smart House.
Literally, yeah. Actually, if you that movie, Smart House, was one of my favorite DComs for sure. And I it's actually based on a Ray
Oh,
Bradbury
really?
story. Yeah, called The Veld, which also Dead Mouse has a song based on that, and it's a really good song and it's a really good story, so
All
I
right,
highly
all right.
recommend
Yeah, and I thought it
it.
was so creepy and like really fit that she said like the toilets measure like your fat percentage and your blood sugar and like other stuff from your urine. And I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is just like showing the extreme monitoring that happens in the suburbs
Yeah,
and especially to
absolutely.
women. Oh yeah, I thought that the so they have like a robo puppy. I had a robo puppy. This was like a real thing. It wasn't like as updated as that, but like yeah, just like the kind of I feel like you're right that like each era is right where like the 70s one is like more it's like more technologically savvy than reality, but it's like all of the kinds of stuff that we were imagining to soon be our reality at the time. And
Right.
the robo puppy, when they're like, "Oh yeah, and here's the dog." I forget what she says his name is, but then he just like falls down the stairs, and I thought that was some hilarious foreshadowing for later glitches with the robots. But we find out that these
Yeah.
ones, and this is one of the biggest differences too, is like the women here are not actually being replaced. They have like nanochips implanted in their brain, and there are a lot of things that actually don't fit with that happen, but it's a convenient rendering, and I think like it makes sense sort of in the world of like this is technology that we don't understand and who knows what it could possibly do.
Yeah. It definitely feels a little bit plot holey at some points, but I think that the plot is almost like incidental to the message, and so it just kind of doesn't matter that
Yeah,
much to
I
me.
agree with that, the plot being incidental.
Yeah. Like the plot is like very much a delivery. Like, I mean, and you could argue that about a lot of movies, but I think this movie in particular, like the plot is like a delivery mechanism.
Yep. Yeah. And so next we see Mrs. Wellington takes her, she's like, "Hey, why don't you join us for our workout class?" And they all talk like this all the time. And
And they work out in like their like housewife outfits and
right, they're
heels
in
and
like
makeup.
their full on dresses. And she's like, "I've revolutionized this aerobic workout where all of the moves are based on household chores. Isn't that fun?" And then she's like, "This one's called the washing machine." And they just start like wiggling and are like, chugga, 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 chugga. It
Oh,
just
it's so
like it
bad.
felt like something you would like literally do in a preschool class.
Yeah, which I think just comes back to like all of the infantilizing of women and just like just not taking them seriously. And I think the one of the really funny things about that scene too is that when Joanna walks in, she's like, "You're all dressed, like you're all like made up," or like however she says it, and the women are like, "Well, goodness, like I couldn't have my husband see me in like drab urban wear or whatever."
I
They
know they
say
like
some like
literally describe her outfit.
yeah, and she's like, "Oh, okay."
Yep. And so then we next go to the town picnic, and this watch especially, I was like, there's a lot of people there. Like, is this whole town that? Because there are times when we see like a smaller group, but it seemed like maybe it's the same Stepford that has existed since the 70s, and it's like grown up.
Oh my God, I love that take. I love that.
Yeah.
I accept that. I have no idea if that was the intention, but like I am accept and embrace that idea very much.
She says at the end that she was like, where can I put a town of robots and no one would notice? Obviously, Connecticut. Which was like such a drag, but I'll take it.
That's it's so funny to me. I mean, I have not been to Connecticut, so like I don't really know, but I also feel like I totally
I've been to
understand.
Connecticut. I think that that is especially like something that people from New York City think like that people from Connecticut are all like white flighty people who've like given up on all of the interesting things in their lives. There are interesting things in Connecticut. It's like kind of pretty, but like it definitely is. I feel like it was a state that was made to be suburbia.
Right. That makes
So they go to the
sense.
town picnic, and then I can't remember. Oh yeah, I think it is Joe says these women are like deranged flight attendants. Don't let them near me. It's so good. And then like going along with the sexy mommy thing, all of the women, well not all of them, but like four of them come over and they all look like dead in the eyes as they do. And and one of the women says to her husband, she like looks him up and down and she's like, now I know why they call it the Banana Republic. And then they like all giggle and I was like, damn, if somebody said that to my fiance, I would be like, excuse me.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I think like it's funny though because the men are like the men and the women. I don't want to say this because like I don't agree that the world works this way, but like for Hollywood's sake, the men and the women are like in
Yeah.
different leagues. And that's like acknowledged at the end when Joanna is like when Joanna and her husband are talking and he's like all the women here are like amazing and beautiful and blah 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 and
All
all
the
the
men.
women are dorks like and he was like saying like we married super women like and what does that make us and
Right,
she's like
right.
lucky like what do you mean
Seriously, like why are you upset? I have like a whole
right
thing about that. I'll get to that.
yeah well and he basically is like it makes us the wives or whatever I don't remember exactly what word he uses but that's basically
Right,
what
and
he
it's
said
like so you I think he says so that makes us the women and it's like, "Oh, so you don't want to be women? You don't want to you see the way women are treated? You don't like that?"
yeah is it a little bit hard maybe
Yeah. Um and yeah, so then at the picnic we meet Bette Midler, who plays Bobby in this one. I love Bette Midler in general, and I love her as Bobby. I think that she is like the perfect update for Bobby. And
yeah I think that she was my favorite part of the remake by
yeah,
like a
I think
significant
so
margin
too. And yeah, she just comes like barreling through the crowd, and she's like, "Am I the only one who finds this a little disturbing?" And I was like, "No, ma'am, you are not." Um, and then she and Joe become fast friends and they meet the gay couple who is like weirdly the stand-in for the black couple. I feel like that's like a very early 2000s thing is they're like, "Oh, right, gay people are oppressed now. We've fixed racism and now we have to try to make sure we talk about gay people."
Right. But it is funny because Bobby in the thing she in the movie at least like Bobby they say she's Jewish, right? And it's like of course the one Jewish lady is the one who's like there's a lot of white people here,
Right,
huh?
right.
like
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot to say that when we were talking about the old one, that when Bobby introduces herself in that one, she says, "I'm Bobby Marks. That's upward mobility for Markowitz." And I thought that was like kind of a bold thing to insert in the 70s. But I mean, Ira Levin.
that's so that like went right over
Mm,
my head
yeah.
too, which
I mean,
is
Ira Levin
wild.
was Jewish, so it makes sense that he was thinking about it. But yeah, I don't know if I've
Yeah,
heard
no
that
for sure.
phrase upward mobility used like that. but that's the assimilation.
Yeah, that's really interesting that he would throw
Right.
that in there.
Yeah, I was wondering if that line was directly from the book. I assume it is, since so many were for that version.
Yeah, I don't
And there's
remember.
kind of like a different, like the same, they do like a larger scene that's kind of the same vibe for Bobby there, where they're like, I mean, the whole thing is just like this, the ideal Stepford wife is like so obviously waspy, as in white Anglo Saxon Protestant. And so they have like a scene where they're all sitting down and talking about, like, they're like, this is our book for this season or whatever. I don't know. It's like a book club, but it's like a decorating book about Christmas. And she's like, "Oh, and don't worry, our we have a chapter about Hanukkah too." And then they're like all giving her ideas for how she could decorate her menorah with pine cones, and just like ways to like turn Christmas decorations into Hanukkah decorations. And I love Bobby slash Bette Midler. She goes, "Why didn't I just spell out Big Jew on my yard in pine cones?" And one of the robots is like, "Yeah,
Which, like, honestly felt just I feel that in my soul during the
yeah,
holidays.
yeah." That was a mood.
I would have slapped someone if I had been sitting at that
Yeah,
little
it
group.
was. I probably would have just left. But yeah, that was bold. And I wrote a thing down about neoliberalism, and I feel like that's sort of the messaging from having the black family in the original one, is like, we can manipulate them and we'll like make them have our values, but we'll appear progressive from the outside. And it's kind of the same thing. I mean, they explicitly do it with the gay man in this, and there's sort of like, there's a lot of like stereotyping in, like, the character feels sort of stereotyped, but I know people who are actually like that.
Right, well, they have him as, like, a more, like, kind
Right.
of feminine, like, gay man, and his partner is, like, more conservative and
Right. And I think
masculine.
he says that they had a conversation, him and his partner, where he was like, "What are you, becoming a gay Republican?" And he's like, "That's like being a gay with a bad haircut." And then when he seems to be the first one of their trio to become robotized, and they
Yeah.
like can't find him, Bobby and Joe. And then the next time they see him, he's like announcing that he's running for Senate, and he's like, "I'm running on a platform of family and conservative values," which is like,
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that was really interesting too is that, like, when Joanna is expressing to her husband that she's concerned for her friend, he's like, she's saying he's so different now, and he's like, well, he doesn't have to be a stereotype,
right.
and she's like, that's like
Yeah,
what?
exactly. It's like everybody is like talking about how he's stereotyped, but they want to change him into something different. And then like they're using the idea of stereotyping someone as kind of like the stand in. And
Right.
yeah, I like that they like find all of his shirts in the trash, and they're, Joanna's like, maybe they're giving them away, and Bobby is like, to who? The gay homeless? Which I was like, I mean, there are a lot of, like, I'm pretty sure there's a higher percentage of LGBTQ homeless people, but in during that joke, they pull out a shirt that has Vigo Mortensen on it, which I thought was really funny and very topical for the times. I also was like, why are they square dancing? I guess that's like the American dance. Do you remember square dancing in gym class? Did you have to do that? Because I was like, why the fuck are we learning this?
I did not
Oh
have to
my
do
god.
that. I have, like, heard that that is a thing, and I think that that is white people stuff, and I think that
Such
that
white
is
people stuff.
well, no, I mean, actually, like, I think that that is, like, part of why it is in there because it is, like, solidifying, like, this is white America. Like, Stepford is white
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. At the end of this one of the people says, like, we're introducing you to American love. Oh, yeah. Stepford, the American way of love. And I was just like, white people? That's not original.
No, not very
Oh
original.
yeah, and then Joanna's like having some feelings about if she wants to be there or not, which like fair. She literally just changed her whole life. It's unsurprising that she would think that. And her husband says to her, this is like one of the most sickening parts, and I think this is why I like don't take him seriously at the end, where I'm like, no, you're still trash, because he said your personality makes people want to kill you.
Yeah, he, like, blames her for the
Yeah,
shooting that
it's like
happened.
total victim blaming. He says it makes people try to kill you, which like I think he's feeling threatened in another physical way where he like can't protect her. And I see that as like a huge way that men try to gain control over women is being like, well, you won't be safe. But the victim blaming is like, well, oh, you make people try to kill you, so you should really just try to be a different person and also maybe don't leave the house.
Yeah. Well, and I think at the end, it's less that I give him any credit, and it's more that, like, her being like, "No, that's what a man is." Like, a man is someone who can deal with a woman, like a real woman. It was more about her saying that than, like, anything really about him, because he's a piece of shit.
Yeah. I think it's partially that I have like such a hard time seeing what man or woman or masculine or feminine mean beyond archetypes. Like I can only see them as these kind of like stereotyped things, and I have like a hard time viewing real people as those things. But like I also like I relate to being a woman, and I mean I'm gender fluid, so some days I feel it more or don't feel it at all or don't feel anything about gender. But I have always felt really uncomfortable with the word woman, and I guess I feel kind of the same about the word man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think gender is real, but in the context of this movie, like this very
Right,
gendered
like they
movie,
are like the literal embodiments of the archetypes. And
yeah,
yeah, so her husband then says to her, only high powered, neurotic, castrating Manhattan career bitches wear black. Is that who you want to be? When he's trying to like convince her to put on an apron and a little pink dress. And she says, ever since I was a little girl. And I was like, oh, I was just imagining her. Like, so much of little girl programming is like, even now, is like, here's your dolly in your little kitchen, and you're gonna be a good mommy when you grow up, which is like, that's fine if that's what you want to be, but it makes it like hard to tell when you're so programmed that way. And I like imagining her as like a tiny businesswoman.
yeah, it's a cute
Yeah.
concept.
And also, I love that Faith Hill was in this movie. Like, yes,
I missed that. I don't think I know what she looks like.
I would never not know what Faith Hill looks like.
I'm
She was
googling.
like, I would sing along to her songs all the time when I was around that age, I guess. No, 2004, that puts me in eighth or ninth grade. I think I was singing her stuff more in like fourth, fifth, sixth grade. But I mean, I would still jam out to a Faith Hill song, and she's beautiful. I mean, I guess I was about to say she looks like a Stepford wife, which is kind of brings me to like that this has become a saying where it's like, it's often like derogatory, and I don't mean that about her, but like it's like being too rigid. And I think it's interesting that it's become this derogatory term when it still is kind of like a stand in for what we think of for like ideal woman. Not that anybody really wants to be that, but that it's like the epitome of the archetype of ideal housewife.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like something that's like, well, and I think it's almost because like it's kind of like one of the many traps of like femininity where you think about how like you can't be too sexual, but you like can't be too prude. You can't be like too pretty, but you can't be too ugly. You can't be too hardworking, but you can't be too lazy.
Right.
Like you have to like it's like no matter what you do, you're doing it wrong. And it kind of feels like that where like a Stepford wife like is still kind of like the expectation and like the framework against like women against like where women are compared. But it's also this like very derided, like shat upon thing, right? Of like this is the best version of a woman, but like we're still gonna make fun of it. It's like very, it's just like feels very
Right,
much like
right. Like there's no winning.
right.
I
No
think
winning
when I've
ever.
used it the most is actually like when I drive into, and I think the 2004 movie did a good example of this also, where like this was a time where like so many of these, like they were calling them McMansions, were made, where there it's like all of these formulaic housing developments. And when I've used that phrase the most is like when I drive into a neighborhood where all the houses look the same, and it gives me like Stepford vibes. Like, is this where I want to be? Where we're like, something about the houses all being the same gives me a feeling like all the people are supposed to be the same. It reminds me of the theme song for the show Weeds. It's like little boxes on the hillside. You know that song? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Well,
No.
it's just like the that song is actually very Stepford Wivesy. It's like there's this formulaic housing development, and then like all the people are supposed to go in there and do the thing that they're supposed to do because the houses are all lined up, and then basically just like the way that we've created neighborhoods to filter people through specific places, especially white people.
Yeah, for sure. Like
Yeah,
cookie cutters.
exactly. Cookie cutter houses, cookie cutter lives. Also, this
Yeah.
is an aside,
Yeah.
but like then we find out that the women are ATMs when Walter like is first being introduced to them not being regular women. And I was like, what the heck?
Right? Like where does
Right,
the
right. It
cash
just
come
that's
from?
one of the big plot holes that like makes no logical sense. But I feel like at that time technology was like none of this makes sense, but like it's cool, so we'll just go along with it. And now people I think are a little more savvy.
Yeah, for sure. Because now I would like have the information to be like, where does the money come from? And like back then, like people may not have been
Right.
like thinking about it that way. But another one that was another kind of like technology joke that I like really laughed out loud at, even though I was like by myself watching, was when they're introducing like the men to Joanna, and one of them's like, "Oh, I work at AOL," and she's like, "Is that why they're all
I
so
know, I
slow?"
wrote that in my notes too. I love that. That was like such a,
Amazing.
yeah, I was thinking like kids today wouldn't get that joke.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. I like it was like the funniest line in the movie to
So
me.
Joanna's starting to be like, this neighborhood is sketchy. I want to leave. So she's like trying to decide if she should leave. And her husband has her locked in the house. And he does. I thought this was an interesting scene where like she's like, I want to leave. And he does unlock the house for her, but just like showing that he has the power to do that. And she doesn't, even though he's like granting her access to leave. It's still like he just has like a thumb over her. And I like that she starts researching some of the women to find out like who they were before. I'm not sure like what led to that. It's less obvious than in the original, but I think this movie sort of expects that you at least understand the plot summary of the original. And
Hmm.
so she's like Googling or something. She's on her computer searching, and she finds that like one woman was nominated for the Court of Appeals to be a judge, and the character Faith Hill is playing was somebody else important. I forget. Oh yeah, she was a CEO of something. And just like everybody used to be high powered. And then her husband comes in and she like clicks away and there's just like an apple pie up there. And she's like, I'm just Googling pies to make so I can get ahead of it. And she like knows she can't be real with him anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is another time where I wrote down hyphenated names as a symbol of feminism. That's like they just keep coming back to that and saying it. Like there are some hyphenated names that sound like really silly, and it's kind of like I guess I see why you did that, but also like what? And there are some hyphenated names that just sound normal, and they like I feel like this is actually part of why they changed the names from the original movie because they were trying to make really ridiculous hyphenated names so they could poke fun at that.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
then then she goes to Bobby's house, and we had seen Bobby's house earlier, and it was just such a mess. Like in the original, Joanna says like, I love a messy kitchen or something, like thank God I can tell you're human. But this one is like beyond that. It looks kind of like a hoarding situation, and Joanna even then is like, whoa, what's up?
Yeah.
And then she walks in, and I thought they had some really good music at several points in this. There's like a creepy waltz that's in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
as some of like the most horror type music where like da da da, that kind of suspense is happening as we're like walking into Bobby's clean house. So I really liked that juxtaposition and like the feeling that we get from the music, that Joanna's like, this is not right. And then kind of her,
Right, like, the more welcoming the house is, the more
totally.
unwelcoming it
And
is.
then kind of her stand-in for, she doesn't stab Bobby in this one, but she's like walking with Bobby and Bobby's like, what's wrong? And then she puts her hand down on the stove, and it's a gas stove and it's on. That one was also kind of a plot hole because like she's supposed to still have a human body, I think. So like even if she couldn't feel it, her hand would be getting messed up.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
see her kids come down, and I was actually wondering if, I thought she didn't have kids before this. Like I was like, where'd these kids come from? Like were these actually children? Because like they had never talked about them before that scene. She doesn't ever say things that she has to do for her children before that moment. I was kind of like, where the heck did these kids come from? And the first one, she goes, here's a sandwich for you, no crust, a Snickers bar, and a Rolex.
Oh my
And I
god,
was like,
yeah.
what? And then she like didn't have one of the action
Yeah.
figures or something that her kid wanted, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry, here's $500. And I think specifically these are three boys that we're seeing, and she's giving them everything that they want. And they're kind of like being trained to be the future Stepford husbands.
Right. Which brings up the question again of what happens to the Stepford
Yep.
daughters.
And so yeah, now it's suddenly dark and stormy for the first time. It's been like pretty bright the whole other time we've seen there. And and then she kind of storms into the men's association, and one of the first things she sees is the portrait of her family, and she has long blonde hair, which is like the symbol of the pinnacle of white women's attractiveness in this world. And then
Yeah.
she sees like the men start like slowly gathering around. Then she's like, where are my children? Where are my husband? Where is my husband? Where are my husbands? And he like kind of walks out sheepishly and talks about why he can't handle his wife being cooler than him, which we talked about a little earlier. So he says,
Yeah.
you're even better at sex, don't deny it. And she says, I wasn't going to.
Yeah. And good for her for knowing her worth.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were kind of talking about earlier like how men don't like being put in women's place, and like obviously he says we're the wuss, we're the girl. And I think still like so many insults for men are calling them women.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the cliche of the football coach being like, "Okay, ladies, like let's
Right,
do
right.
this."
Yeah. And they're kind of at the same time saying like, oh, if you gain power, you're being the man. Like this is, they're like, the whole thing is like they're saying it's like a role reversal, which I think to a certain degree there is an element of that, and like that goes into the twist ending where like it's really been a woman who's been orchestrating all of this. And I think sometimes in trying to find liberation, people end up just taking on the role of the oppressor instead of trying to actually find something that would be liberatory for everyone.
Yeah. It also feels like it's kind of like poking fun at feminism in a way that's not on its side
Mm,
necessarily. It felt like to me in the remake, like the first movie feels very clear about like what we're supposed to take away from it, whereas this one I think is like there's a little bit more room for interpretation in a way that I don't
Yeah,
love.
I can see that. Also, so I don't really know what the difference between second wave and third wave feminism is. Like, I'm sure I would recognize the points, but I feel like I've learned more about third wave feminism, but I mean, I read Betty Friedan and things like that. I think Betty Friedan's first wave, but the book and the first movie were during second wave feminism, and the 2004 movie is during third wave feminism. So I feel like some of the things that were going on were specifically related to those.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. And so then uh, Mike, who we find out it's Mike short for Microsoft, like Diz for Disney. And there still is a Diz for Disney, but like we're at this point when we're like there's like the reveal that they're going to turn her into a robot, or so she thinks. He like plays a video and he goes, "We take a gloomy, dissatisfied woman," and she's just like, there's like someone. It's a cartoon. She's like slouching and has purple hair and looks grumpy. Then they like,
I have purple hair.
I know. I was thinking that this is like one of those things where like I've heard like men's rights association type people say negative things about women with dyed hair. If I don't know. I just know that they don't like dyed hair, and I don't know why.
Yeah, like they hate blue-haired liberals. It's like I feel like a phrase you see in like comment
Right,
sections a
right, right.
lot.
It's like yeah. I thought it was funny that she was slouching. Like she looks grumpy, but they're like, "We'll fix your posture too." Like, okay. And then so she goes into a machine. She comes out like skinnier and with the huge boobs and blonde hair. It's like a very Playboy bunny look. She's wearing like one of those like little leotard bustier things. And then
Yeah.
she like goes and puts her husband's slippers on and like kneels in front of him. And they show at the same time that the way that they accomplish this is just by putting a few harmless nanochips in her brain, totally normal. And like Walter is watching this and we see his face and he looks horrified, like he hadn't considered how anything was going to happen, and now that he sees it even in like a glossy version, he's like, "Oh wow, this is actually terrible. I didn't want to think about this. I just wanted a perky wife."
Yeah.
And she asks him, "Is this what you really want?" And if they can say "I love you" and if they mean it. And he like seems like he's sort of considering. And I wrote this down. I can't remember if this was like something in the movie or something that I was thinking of, but I know that Mike is saying stuff about how like you get to remove all of the negative parts of your partner, and like wouldn't you want to do that? It's like if you just only have them at their very best. But like I feel like you don't really love someone if you only love them at their very best. That's just not what love is.
Right. And I think that speaks to like Joanna kind of saying like can they say they love you and like can they mean
Right.
it?
Yeah. They can't mean it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And so then we see this is another plot hole thing where they're like, "We're not replacing your body," but then like this body comes up from the floor and it has like the blank eyes that are reminiscent of the original movie. And
Mhm.
I was kind of like, what's up with that body if you're not replacing her body? And yeah, another thing they said to her was like, "While you were trying to become men." And it's just so weird that that's like they just relate wanting liberation and power to being a man, but they don't see why women would want that.
Yeah, well, and I think it's even more interesting that he's like, while you were trying to become men, we were trying to become gods. Like, what a thing to say.
Exactly.
Well, and I think it just speaks to like almost like a belief that like like men are more
Right.
evolved than women. Like that's kind of like what it right like if it's like the next taking like the next evolutionary step or whatever for like women to be more like men and then men to be more like gods. It's like is that what we're doing? Like is that how you view
Yeah,
this
and I
right
think
now?
especially in Christian spaces, I've heard this before where it's like, oh, men were created by God first, so obviously we're more evolved. Oh yeah, and then she
Yeah.
gives him like a tearful kiss as they are being like lowered into the ground. And then we see her in the grocery store next, and she's got the long blonde hair and the little dress on and like a bow or something. And every one of the robot women is just like rolling through the shopping market, and like all of they say is like, hello Roberta, hello Robert, hello. They're just like, oh, I think it's Roger, actually, not Robert, is their friend who also gets turned as the first gay man who's turned into a nano chip bot thing. But
Yeah.
that's how the original movie ends, is in the supermarket. And then after this, we see her at kind of like a ball, and there's Mrs. Wellington and her husband Mike up there, and that's when they say like, American love the Stepford way, or Stepford the American way of love. And then they introduce the couple, and then Mike ends up like going out to the garden while Walter goes to free all of the women. And the way that this happens was really weird too, where they like kind of look like they're being abducted by aliens. They like shoot their arms back and their heads go up, and then like light shines out of their foreheads.
Yeah.
And
Very
then
weird.
they they seem to remember what has happened, so are like obviously pissed.
Yeah. I think that's like the only thing I liked about the twist ending was that there was like an opportunity for the women to like come back and be pissed. Like I think
Yeah,
that's the only
I
thing
like
I
that too.
liked.
And then Mrs. Wellington comes over to her husband and says, there's something unspeakable going on in the ballroom. It's an apocalypse. And I was like, my, this woman is dramatic. And she's the
Yeah.
only one who doesn't seem to be changing, which is how we like start being like, oh, something's up with her. And then Mike goes, control your wives. And all of the husbands are like trying to use their remotes. Oh, yeah. That's something we haven't discussed yet, is like, I thought that was a good update on the technology, is the women have remotes. It doesn't totally make sense to me. Again, it's kind of a weird tech plot hole, but I mean, I think that that's like an ultimate mechanism of control.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then all of the men are confused why Walt hadn't changed her. I think this is when he says something and she's like, he's a real man. And then Mike is going to like attack Walt, and Joe hits him in the back of the head, and his head comes flying off, and we see that it's a robot head. Which that actually surprised me, and I was like, my like
Me
jaw
too.
dropped when I watched it, and I had seen it before, but I just forgot about that, and was like, holy shit.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before, and I watched it after reading the first book and watching the first movie, and I was like, "What is happening here?
Right.
Like, everything is wrong."
Yeah, it's very unexpected when you're expecting the original movie. And then Mrs. Wellington comes in and she says that like she's like, I was like all of you women, I was a neurosurgeon, I was overstressed, overworked, and underloved. And she says that she like had contracts with the Pentagon and with Mattel, who are the makers of Barbie. I was like, that's an
Yeah,
interesting combo. And I guess it explains the things that she did to the women, which is why they said that. And that's when she also says that Connecticut is where a town of full of robots would go unnoticed. And she says that she made this robot husband because her original husband cheated on her and she killed him. And so she just like ran away and has been, she's like confesses to this murder like 20 years later or whatever. And I'm like, how did this woman get away with this and has just been living in this sleepy little town? Like, that's pretty sketch.
because she's a blonde white lady. What do you mean?
You're right. You're right. I know, but like nobody even seems to have known that it happened. But I don't know. She seems to be smart and manipulative, so I'm sure she set it up in a way where it didn't even look like anything.
Yeah,
But
that's fair.
yeah, she gives me like Marjorie Taylor Greene vibes, honestly.
Yeah.
And then like one of the last scenes, she's like holding the robot head and she kisses him and gets electrocuted.
Yeah, and it's so over the top. Like it's just so over
Yeah,
the
this is
top.
peak camp. And she goes, "I'm in love with a waltz and a town and a man." And then she kisses him and she like rolls over dramatically and it like pans out and she's wearing this like huge skirt that takes up like half of the screen even when it's panned out. She's an interesting character. And yeah, like I definitely didn't expect like the originals are like very much directly about men controlling and the patriarchy, and this one is kind of like the internalization of the patriarchy, and I feel like it's mostly saying, I don't know, I think it's kind of like blaming women for feminism not taking off or going further, which I feel conflicted about because I think it's true in some ways and also a very convenient excuse for men.
Right. It kind of like lets the men off the hook in a way that I don't really like. And I think, I mean, I guess it's cool that she like was so smart that she tricked all of these men into like listening to what she wants and like enacting what she wants, but also what she wants is what they want. Like this isn't that sneaky because you're just doing what they already want. I don't know. It's yeah, I don't know. It definitely takes something away from it for me that like it ends up being a woman
Yeah,
behind all of
I
it.
think same. Like it is a message that I think needs to be discussed more, but I don't think I like this as the framework for it, and especially like being behind like so it was this woman who programmed the women to be able to make their boobs bigger with a remote. Like there's just too many things that are like so such men's vision, not like she's like I just wanted to, it's the make America great of it all. She's like I just wanted to live in this.
Yeah, it is totally make America great again vibes.
Yep, yep. And she's like I don't think that she cared if the women had bigger boobs or not. I think she just like she's imagining this time that never really existed, but she like also seems to be a fan of the racism and anti-Semitism and all of it.
Yeah,
Also,
for
she like
sure.
hangs out with the women a lot. Can you imagine like knowing you're the only lucid person in a group and being like, I'm gonna hang out like they're all her little dolls?
That's probably like half the point though, and I think a lot of this whole thing kind of reminds me of like men who will say like, well, men don't care if you wear makeup and wear nice clothes, like only other women care about that. And it's like you don't understand how any of this works, do you? Like it kind of is like in the same
Yeah.
vein as that of like, well, like women aren't happy because like they can't, don't have time for their kids anymore and blah blah blah, and like they want to be like, she says, I just want to live in a world where men are men and women are lovely and
Yeah, the word
cherished.
cherished there really, I was like, okay. I feel like they did like in a very short amount of time they tried to like wrap up a lot of character development for her. But it kind of worked.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. It definitely took something away for me of, I think there are a lot of ways they could have changed the ending and kept the message intact, and I just feel like something got really lost in
Yeah,
translation there.
I agree. I just kind of wanted, I don't know. I feel like Walter was like a good symbol of like allies for feminism, I guess. But I wanted Joanna to have more agency, I guess. But I think part of the point was like there are places where the person who's being oppressed can't have agency, and that's why allies are important.
Yeah. Yeah, because she could not have prevented becoming a robot on her
Right.
own. Uh, yeah, that would not have happened. But I guess it's aggravating a little bit to me because they could have made the twist of her not becoming a robot and like them freeing all the women without having it be like, oh, but it was the women folk all along. Like, come
I
on.
know. I would have preferred that. But I like so the actual ending after that they go like 6 months ahead and Roger, Bobby, and Joanna are on the Larry King show. And they're like all talking about what they're doing now. Roger is like actually running for Senate. And Bobby wrote a book that's called Wait Till He's Asleep, Then Cut It Off, which is hilarious.
A little Lorena Bobbitt action.
Yeah. And then Joanna is like working on some documentary about the men or something. I don't know. She's doing something with TV again. I also thought it was interesting that she cut her hair short again, but it was still blonde. Like she like kept some part of this.
Yeah. I also just love how like when we find out what happens to the men are just like all grocery shopping and like not allowed to chat with each other and like not allowed to connect and just have to like get their stuff and like
Right.
get it home, and it like sets it up as like let's
Right.
see how
That's
you
like
like
what made
it.
me like the twist ending because I was like, okay, it makes sense that like there's this one woman who is also being punished. She like maybe dies or something. It's kind of unclear, but like it they make it look like she like just wants to hug her dying robot husband who's shocking her and probably died, but it's like one of those off-screen deaths, I guess. And but yeah, it makes sense for her to be punished. I don't think she should have died necessarily, but she did it herself. She made that choice. And then like all the rest of the men are like seeing what's up and the three people who were still lucid. I kind of wanted to see the rest of the women, I guess. Like how are they all doing and like what does it mean for their husbands to be trapped in this thing that they were trapped in? Although
Right.
the men are still lucid, at least it seems.
Yeah, they just have to do this stuff.
Yeah. And it's like pretty much what they were avoiding the whole time is like these tasks that they think are feminine. They're like, "Oh, I'll just make my wife do all of these."
Yeah. It's funny, in the original movie there is a scene where Joanna is developing photographs and Walter is kind of like, I've been watching these kids for hours. I don't know what to do with them. And she's like, you've had 7 like years of higher education. Figure it out. Like she's
Yeah,
like, what the fuck do you mean you don't know what to do with them?
right. I love that too. And yeah, I think that it's become more common for dads to be actively involved in their kids' lives, but there are definitely still dads who are like, I don't know what to do with these kids. Like women just have like automatic knowledge about how to do these things.
Right. There are also still a lot of people who call it babysitting when men watch their own children.
Right. What the hell? It's
Like
just
it's
weird.
so
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I think one of the other big themes of Stepford in general is like toxic positivity. And I feel like there's just so much of that wrapped up into the idealized vision of a woman. Like in the cartoon where they show how they're changing them, she's like grumpy and then they make her happy. And I've seen so there's a diner that I used to go to when I lived in Massachusetts and it's like the 50s diners are like a big thing all around the country. And so at this 50s diner that's like literally called 50s, they have a cutout from a women's home ec course from high school. It's just like one page that's in a frame on the wall and it says like don't bother your husband with your thoughts basically. And it's like when he gets home he's going to be tired and you should be at the door with a drink and smiling. You wouldn't want to upset your husband by making him think about your feelings. Like all of these
Yeah.
things that are like oh, right, like women were like very explicitly taught this for a long time. And now there's still, like, it's still in the air where it's like, you should be like this, even if we're not like literally being taught it in school.
Yeah. Well, and I think that actually kind of brings me to like another thing I wanted to make sure we talked about a little bit of the way housewives around like the time the book came out and the first movie were medicated. Like thinking about like Milltown and Valium, like the kind of early drugs that they would give to women that they would basically give them to numb them out, right? Like they were feeling they were feeling reasonable feelings, right? Like they were feeling unfulfilled by being tied to the house. They were feeling understimulated. They were also feeling the stress and the pressure of being like a woman. And rather than like address those issues in a way that is meaningful, right? They were prescribed like incredibly addictive drugs, right? Like incredibly addictive medicines that were really like designed to numb them out. Like they weren't really designed to make them feel better. They were designed to make them feel
Right.
nothing. And how that is so ingrained in like the Stepford ideal, right? Of like, you don't really have feelings. Like you are putting on a show of happy feelings, but it doesn't really
Yep.
matter if you're happy. They're less concerned with happiness and they're more concerned with
Right,
smiling.
exactly. As long as you appear happy, it doesn't matter if you're actually happy because it's all about presentation.
Yeah. And I think we can maybe leave a link to it in the show notes, but the podcast You're Wrong About has like a really, really good episode about the Stepford Wives where they really get into the history of those drugs and just the overlap of kind of like what that looked like and what that meant with some of the themes of Stepford Wives. And they get into the history really, really well. I definitely recommend
Yeah, I hadn't heard
listening.
of Milltown until I listened to that episode. But I definitely had heard of Valium, and I had a pharmacist once when I picked up Valium who was like, "Oh, mommy's little helper," and I was like, "What the heck? And why do I even know this phrase? So creepy."
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, really, really sad to think about that the response to this like disenfranchisement was like, just check out, it's fine, like you don't even need to really be here.
Yeah,
Your body needs to be here, you need to keep things going, you need to go through the motions, but like you don't need to be here. And it's like when Joanna was saying like there will be someone with my name who cooks and cleans but she won't take pictures and she won't be me. It's like that's what it is, right? It's that kind of hollowness of, because this wasn't like, oh, if you have a panic attack, take a Valium. This was like, take Valium all day. Like, don't ever not be on Valium.
yep, yeah. And another thing that the You're Wrong About episode made me think of was Naomi Wolf's book, The Beauty Myth. And she talks about how, uh, kind of like, as we were talking about, like, where there's like a pushback against any progress, like when women started working, there was like more beauty standards that were put into place because it was to make it harder for them. And like, as one of the things that You're Wrong About, they talk about the like tech advances that helped the home, like dishwashers, washing machines. But it was like around the time that those things were being introduced where it became like a huge thing to have like a perfectly clean home, or to like bake really well. And just like, I mean, like we were talking about, there's no winning. Like every time you reach the top, there becomes, the floor drops out and it becomes like a whole new set of rules.
Right.
And also, I was thinking about how this book was written like right around when the ERA was passed, and it's the Equal Rights Amendment. I watched a show about the ratification that's called Mrs. America that's on Hulu. It's really good, interesting historical fiction. I don't know exactly what was in the Equal Rights Amendment, but I know it was stuff around like women having their own bank accounts and like being able to make and save money for themselves, which just like totally changed women's lives.
Something else that I was thinking about just in terms of like feminism generally is that like the Joanna in the original movie is framed as like being interested in women's lib, but like we don't really get into far to like what her actual values are around like feminism. But Joanna in the newer one has like very much like white feminism, like girl boss feminism
Yeah,
vibes to her that I
I
don't
agree.
love.
She like they make her pretty unlikable, and it seems on purpose.
Yeah. I think that they give the men in the remake a lot of ways out, like a lot of kind of outs for how bad it really is.
I feel like a lot of the men, like we were saying, like they want to be babies. Like a lot, like they were like playing with little robot cars, and there's like one character, the actor, I feel like always plays roles like this. Kind of, I can't remember his name, but it's Bobby's husband, and he's always like hee hee hee, and just being like very childish. And I think like that, I don't know. I feel like you can, it's like the learned helplessness, which is like the same thing as men being like, I don't know what to do with my kids. And I think like it can be read as a way out, like it often is, but it just like makes them look, I don't know,
Like foolish and incompetent.
foolish. Yeah, foolish. It makes them like, it doesn't make it not their fault to me.
Yeah. It doesn't make it not their fault to me, but I just feel like it just like there are so many things in the remake that feel like it waters down what's happening and what's really being discussed. But
Yeah.
what can you do?
It's definitely less creepy, and like I was gonna get into asking you what haunts you, and like I find like the second one is not that haunting.
Yeah. I think I really think like what haunts me is the quote that I like opened up with of just
Can you say it again?
yeah, it's where Walter is introducing the idea of him joining the men's association. And Joanna says, I give up on you. Why don't you ever once just tell me the truth? You pretend that we decide things together, but it's
Mm,
always you, what you want. You asked me if I want to move out here, and I found you'd already been looking at a house. You asked me if I like this place, and I found you already made a down payment. Now you're asking me about the lousy men's association, and it's quite obvious you've already joined. Why bother to ask me at all?
yeah.
And how it really does seem that the men just need the women to be there
Mm,
as like a thing to bounce themselves off of, and like making them into these like robots or animatrons, like whatever language, right, whatever kind of iteration keeps them as that without the interference of them having these feelings and these opinions and like wanting things to be different, and how it can give the men like the illusion that they are considering someone else, but someone else who really requires no
yeah.
consideration because they don't really have any to offer. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I think Ira Levin again, like in Rosemary's Baby, seems like really tapped into women of this era, and is like saying like you're right, men just want sex dolls who cook for them and watch their kids, which is really disappointing. But yeah, I said the second one wasn't haunting, but I am really haunted and disturbed, and I'm like, Joe, get out of that marriage from him saying the victim blamey, you make people want to shoot you. Like I feel like, I don't know, that would be a really hard thing for me to get past if someone said that to me. I don't know if I could stay in a relationship with them. I definitely wouldn't trust them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Because they're saying basically, I can understand why someone would attack you. And like, that's a horrible thing to hear from someone who's supposed to love you.
Right. And in the first one, like he he just doesn't seem like he likes her at all. Like he's just, I don't know. Their relationship definitely seems to have broken down a lot more than the new one. Like it's, I don't know. even though New Walt says that horrible thing and like other horrible things, he does seem they seem to have more relationship to me, even though it's not a happy one, but they still like seem invested in each other, whereas I feel like Joanna doesn't really feel. I think like her ex is right when she goes to visit him, that she is bored in her relationship, but I think she feels too obligated to, like, she's loyal, she just wants to stay with him even though she's not happy, and she like finds happiness in photography and other things. That's pretty haunting to me overall, but it's that scene that I said like feels like that's like the scene that feels like a horror movie to me, where he's like coming to get her, and yeah, he just has like murder in his eyes. And you like don't know if she's gonna get out of the house, and it's raining then too. And that's like I can feel that feeling, and it won't leave me soon.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one that gets under your skin in a way that feels really real. All right, so that wraps up our conversation about the Stepford Wives. If you have any movies you'd like to hear us talk about, feel free to follow us over on Instagram at What Haunts You Pod. We will periodically put question boxes up in our stories for recommendations and suggestions, but we will also always accept DMs if there are any movies you want to hear about.